You're watching World Talks on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Pomp and politics have been on full display this week between some of the world's economic heavyweights, with Russian President Vladimir Putin hosting the so-called Brics summit in the city of Kazan. Those in attendance included Chinese President Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It's a summit that also saw United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres arrive in Russia, leading to backlash and criticism. So, where to next for Brics, and did President Putin get what he wanted? Here to discuss all of this and more is former Polish Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Grzegorz Kołodko, and of course, Professor at Kazan University. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
Let's start with the Brics summit. Was it a success, or was it more of a PR exercise for President Putin?
No, it is much more than just PR, because in my reading, all the Brics exercise is a kind of response for performing for a longer period of time G7, that is the 7 most advanced market Western capitalist economies, and Brics, which was established dozen or so years ago. At the onset was not clear what is going to be, but now it is a mechanism of coordination, different aspects of policies and politics between some countries of so-called Global South and Russia, which is not definitely a member of so-called Global South, whatever that implies. And I think that it's quite an interesting aspect of tectonic global geopolitical shift which we observe in the world. The countries of Global South relative to G7 are more and more important, stronger in economic times, and they would like to have more to say in political terms. And for that reason, the consultation mechanisms, which are annual summits of Brexit, happens in different places, and by rotation mechanism, it happens that it is now in Russia, and I would not pay that much attention to the fact that it's been in Russia. Much more important is what they have accomplished, what they have decided, and what will be the follow-up.
Much has been made of UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres attending. Why do you think he took the step of attending, but also going to Russia? I know you mentioned that it doesn't matter whether it's in Russia or elsewhere, but Russia is at war.
Well, Mr. Guterres is Secretary General of the United Nations, and he must make whatever possible effort to continue the dialogue, to contribute to attempting of solution to the many conflicts we have. And I have nothing against, actually, I'm positive as far as my judgment is concerned, that he decided to go not to Russia, not to meet Mr. Putin. He went to summit of Brics to discuss the issues which are also concern of much bolder concept, much bolder organization, which is the United Nations. We have to remember that Brics does represent a lion's share of global population and growing share of global output. So if Mr. Guterres was there, I think it may give a little bit chance for solving the problems we do have in our world.
But he must have known what signal that would send to go to Russia.
Well, that's his decision, and I wouldn't criticize him for going to Russia if he was invited by the host of Brics, which by coincidence is also president of the country of Russia, at the time of this shameful, regrettable Russian invasion of Ukraine. He went for Brics summit, and I think that he could not reject the invitation from the host of the Brics summit, which, one more time, happens to be Mr. Putin. It doesn't tell anything that he supports Russia's policy. He was there rather to make an influence upon the change of Russia's policy towards the peaceful solution of the awful Ukrainian crisis, and I think that he has done a little bit to this end.
What are major world leaders like President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Modi trying to get out of this group? You've previously noted, and I quote, that China has engaged in globalisation in a very smart way. But is it smart to be close to President Putin, this close to President Putin, an alleged war criminal?
Again, I don't think it is a question to be smart or not smart meeting Mr. Putin, President of Russia, but it is smart to manage the pro-growth, succeeding in impressive economic development policy, which is the case of China and the current Chinese leader, President Xi Jinping. But if you are touching the issue, President of Russia, President of China, Prime Minister of India, everybody has come to Kazan for the summit with different intentions. Definitely, China has the ambitions, as China does aspire, similar like India, but not Russia. They don't have any chance to be, if not the leader, then the paramount power within so-called global South during this time of tectonic geopolitical changes. The same agenda is priorities for Mr. Modi. And yes, President Putin, of course, being happy that the summit happens this year in his country where he is president, is taking advantage of this event to sell a little bit of his political agenda, which is rather deserving to be under strong criticism. Yes, for him it is PR, but not for China, not for Xi Jinping, not for India, not for Modi. They do not need it. They have different mechanisms to make PR. They simply want to make more important in the global economic and political game the so-called global South, where they are the biggest and the most and growing economies. So the relative power of India and China is growing, and the relative significance of Russia is on the decline.
If China wants to be regarded as such a key superpower, I spoke to Finnish President Alexander Stubb a couple of weeks ago. He says Xi Jinping could give President Putin a call and the war would end in Ukraine. Do you agree? And if so, why not have that conversation and make that happen at a summit like at Brics in Kazan?
Neither one call of the current president of China, Mr. Xi Jinping, or maybe, again, President of the United States, Mr. Trump, if he will win the forthcoming election, can break a peaceful solution to the conflict in Ukraine by one call. But definitely the political position, the significance for the Chinese leader is such strong that President Xi Jinping can influence the performance, the behavior of Russia's president, of Moscow, of Kremlin. We don't know what was going on behind the closed door in Kazan, but I do not have any doubt that President Xi Jinping was pushing President Putin to come to the end with this invasion, because the very big difference between Russia and China is that China has not whatsoever interest in continuation of this military or any other military conflict, is it conflict in Gaza or in Sudan, etc. In China's interest is economic growth and social economic development elsewhere, because that is additional factor to sustain China's momentum. The critical aim of China's leadership is to keep the economy growing, because that legitimizes the monoparty system of which the leader is Mr. Xi Jinping. And the better performance of European Union market, of African market, and of course of American market, the better for China. For Russia, there is different logic, which is not our logic, but this is the Russian logic. The weaker the other global partners, the relatively stronger Russia. This is very short-sighted, very unwise, contrary to China's policy, and to different, but within the same class, of taking globalization and international relations to one's advantage is the policy of President Modi, who was able to win recent election, similar like Mr. Putin, yet in Russia it was not very democratic. In India, it was by and large according to the liberal democracy rule. Yet, of course, nobody is perfect, not even China. But China has the ambition to take also Brics to the advantage of sustaining continuation of China's expansion and growing position in international scene. And from this perspective, I think that the Kazan summit of Brics has made a certain step forward by pointing to the development of new development bank, of whose chairwoman is the former president of Brazil, Mrs. Dilfov, and so on. I'm not so much positive about an effort of Brics leaders. They are so different from this perspective to establish the new financial architecture to weaken relative position of dollar. Dollar will remain in foreseeable future and maybe even beyond the critical currency of the world. But I do understand India and China especially, but also Brazil and South Africa and the new members of Brics, that they would like to be a little bit less dependent on dollar and American, Washington-based policy.
Can I just point out on your fact talking about China wanting peace in Europe? You've extensively researched China. You've written a book on its political economy. Yes, on one hand, you have President Xi Jinping calling for de-escalation of the conflict in Ukraine, but then it's been widely reported that China supported Russia's war through backdoor battlefield deals. I mean, is that a double standard?
I don't believe that China supports Russia military action in Ukraine or elsewhere. As I said, in China's interest, short and long term, is a peaceful development, because that is giving them a chance to take ongoing globalization, to which they refer as win-win. Sometimes I'm joking, let's accept inclusiveness of globalization, but it is not going to be win-win 2-0 for China. China is talking about making globalization more inclusive. How much it is working to this end, we'll see. China has not any whatsoever interest in military conflict in Ukraine and elsewhere, because it is against China's economic interest.
So just to be clear, so you don't believe those reports that China has supported Russia?
I wouldn't say that China is supporting politically Russia, definitely not. And, we don't know, but we may presume that Mr. Putin has heard something from President Xi Jinping, but I don't think also that China will use our economic and political leverage to force Russia to come to the conclusion. But I'm still positive. We could avoid this conflict in Ukraine, this invasion of Russia, of Ukraine 3 years ago, and we did not avoid it, not because of failing of foreign policy of China, but because of failing foreign policy of some Western powers, starting from the United States. So whatever we can do, is it Mr. Xi Jinping or next president of US and anybody else, to contribute to getting rid of this military conflict in Ukraine, fine. And the same about Gaza. And what I believe, China is making certain diplomatic efforts to also bring the end of the military conflict in Gaza, in Lebanon, to an end. And I cannot say it about American diplomacy, which is actually all the time talking about bringing peace, but it's not doing that much as they can do. They have much bigger leverage than China with this respect.
I just want to ask you one very, very quick question. We're running out of time. Some dismiss Brics because they say it's largely an alliance of repressive states. Yes or no?
Again?
Some dismiss Brics because they say it is largely an alliance of repressive states. Do you agree? Yes or no, because we're running out of time?
No. That's something different to what I said before. I don't put that much trust in Brics as such. I think that is another additional instrument of coordination policy within the Global South to make the worlds of the future more balanced. And more balance may imply also faster developing and more peaceful. So Brics is nothing negative, but don't expect too much from Brics. It is just another exercise which we have during the time of this tectonic geopolitical shift.
Former Polish Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Grzegorz Kołodko, thank you again for your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
And that's this edition of World Talks. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Goodbye for now.